Get the party going. Oh, I just kicked off and now the recording's in progress. So welcome everyone. Welcome everyone who's here in person, face to face. It's very exciting to see people again in real life. And welcome everyone that's joining us virtually. We're really glad and pleased that you're able to join us for the Green Software Foundation Summit here in New York City. So do we have slides?
We do. Danielle will
bring them up. While we're waiting for the slides, I'll introduce myself. My name's Chris Murphy. I'm the CEO for North America for Thoughtworks. And I have the great privilege of working alongside 1,000 Thoughtworkers across North America with the mission of creating extraordinary impact through our culture and through our technology excellence. And we're just thrilled to be the host of today's Green Software Foundation Summit. Now I saw the slides pop up and then I saw them disappear. So this is clearly, it's clearly greener not to have slides running in the background. We've hit the first note there. So let's continue.
And they're back.
So let's flick through a few. Oh, that's a big photo of me. I've introduced myself. Let's move on from that one. Okay, a bit about Thoughtworks. So Thoughtworks, for those of you who don't know who Thoughtworks is, we're a global software consultancy. We work across strategy and technology and design to help our clients and help businesses become the modern technology businesses of the future. We're a mission-driven organization, as we've talked about. Our role is to create extraordinary impact through our culture and technology excellence. We've been proud thought leaders for many years. We've got our 30th birthday coming up next year. We've been around a while. But the full 30 years of that have been digital native. And we've been thought leaders throughout that time, contributing to open source products and tools, but also writing a number of the seminal books and publications, over 100 to date, around topics ranging from continuous delivery and microservices, agile, infrastructure as code, creating an agile organization, microservices, I've talked about that one, and data mesh, as some of just a few examples. And of course, as the slide here shows, we've got about 11,000 Thoughtworkers globally across 48 offices on 5 continents. Next slide. Now, Thoughtworks has, over those 29, nearly 30 years of our existence, we've long been a mission-driven organization with really a strong desire to think about, as we bring our technology skills to the world, how do we do so in a way that creates a positive social impact? Having regard to the role that technology has across increasingly every aspect of our society and the way we interact with each other. We've been fortunate and humbled across that time to be able to contribute to a range of different impact-driven projects. They include some of these you'll see here on the slide. Bumney, an open source electronic medical record system for low resource environments that currently is deployed at over 500 hospitals globally. We've also had the opportunity more recently to contribute to the Cloud Carbon Footprint tool, a tool which enables organizations to understand the carbon emissions and impact of their use of the cloud and to optimize and reduce those emissions accordingly. Another one we've contributed to, not up here, is something called BurretSim. I have to read this because it's complicated. It's an open source agent-based simulation framework for disease modeling using synthetic populations. That's pretty cool. I feel that we're at a pivotal moment here in society as we see this increasing digitization of every industry, of every organization in the world. We've got an opportunity, and I would argue an obligation, to ensure that that digitization is occurring in a sustainable way. And if we get that right, what an impact we can have. And if we don't, well, we've got to ensure that doesn't happen. Here at Thoughtworks, we've got the privilege of being a consultancy. So we can work with a number of our clients to help ensure that as they're going through their digitization journey, that they're doing in a way that helps, that they do so in a more sustainable way. We've also got the necessity to look internally upon ourselves. So we're proud to have embarked upon our own carbon emissions reduction journey, committing to a science-based target initiatives to reduce our own emissions. We're committing to reduce Thoughtworks Scope 1 and Scope 2 GHC emissions by 50% from 2019 baselines by 2030. And similarly, our Scope 3 emissions by 85% per employee, also off the same baseline by 2030. In short, it's a big, ambitious mission, but we're really glad that we've got a community that we can work with to help us achieve those goals. So enough about Thoughtworks. Let's talk a bit about the Green Software Foundation, which of course is why we're all here today. Now, the Green Software Foundation is a not-for-profit organization which was founded under the Linux Foundation. And the Green Software Foundation sees software, well, software can be used in one of two ways. Software can be part of the climate problem, or software can be part of the climate solution. And clearly, the latter is what we're focused on. Now, how can software be part of the climate solution? Well, there's two ways that that can occur as well. One is we can build greener software, making green software in a way that thinks about sustainability built in, changing the culture of software so that sustainability becomes a core priority, just like we think about performance, security, costs, and accessibility. Software can also play a role by making green enabling software. So creating software which can enable all aspects of our society to think about carbon and reduce it accordingly. Now, the Green Software Foundation, as its name suggests, is focused primarily on the former. You need both, but how do we create green software? And of course, in order to be able to do that and to do it at scale, we need an alliance. We need to build a trusted ecosystem of people, standards, tooling, and best practices for creating and building greener software. And there lies the mission of the Green Software Foundation. Could we jump to the next slide? So who is the Green Software Foundation? Since its founding, I think about 18 months ago, we've now got 32 member organizations and over almost 700 individuals and growing. And that represents academics, it represents organizations in the non-profit sector, and it represents, of course, for-profit organizations, including a number of Fortune 500 companies. And we hope and expect that the membership will continue to grow, and we can use opportunities like this and your good selves to talk more about the foundation and how we can all contribute. So, without further ado, we'll get to today's schedule. Shortly, my colleague Lisa McNally, who heads our sustainability and clean tech practice for Thoughtworks in North America, will be hosting a fireside chat with some wonderful people from Etsy and Spotify about their journey towards creating green software. We're going to have a break for virtual viewers. You'll be able to go and have a rest. Those here, not so lucky, you'll get some lunch and we'll have the opportunity to socialize and talk about what we're all doing. And then I think at 1 p.m. Eastern time, we're going to reconvene and there'll be the opportunity to participate in one of two workshops. And you'll get a choice about which one you participate in. And we'll talk more about that shortly. So, without further ado, that's enough from me. And I'll hand over to Lisa to take us on with the rest of the day.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. As Chris said, I'm head of clean tech and sustainability at Thoughtworks. And I am super excited that we have all of you in the room. And we also have we had 180 folks sign up virtually. I think we're up to about 50 right now as people are getting warmed up. I wanted to invite our panelists up here to the front of the room. We're going to have some slides that we'll be showcasing as we kind of walk through the questions. And of course, we'll start with some introductions in just a moment. Sound okay? Everything's good, Cam? Okay, so just some housekeeping. Since we are doing this as a hybrid, we will take questions at the end, but as they come up, please jot them down. We don't want to lose them. Virtual attendees, we have the chat now turned on. You are welcome to type in your questions. We won't get to them until the end, just so we can get through. We have a lot of really great content. And those in the room also just please hold your questions till the end, and then we'll intersperse, I think, the chat questions with those in the room. So I think we'll go ahead, and I will not stand, as you said, I will sit with you. I think we'll start with some introductions. So we have, let's start with Etsy. We have Emily, Katie, and Will. Will is from Spotify, Will Spielberg, Katie Sundstrom, and Emily Summer from Etsy. And let's start with our first question. And this is going to be, I think, one of the longer questions just to set the foundation of why we're here and talk a little more about sustainability within technology, what leading tech companies are doing to promote sustainability, like Etsy and Spotify, and also what you all do on the day-to-day to promote it within your organization. So let's just kind of start with kind of high-level foundational, what are your companies doing to promote sustainability, and how do you operate within that to continue to promote it on your day-to-day work?
Cool. I can hop in. I'm Emily Summer. I've been at Etsy for 8 years as an engineer, then an engineering manager, back to an engineer, and recently I moved into a new position as an architect focused on sustainability, which is pretty cool. So Etsy's journey to towards sustainable tech really starts. With our company's guiding principles. So we have 5 guiding principles. We commit to our craft. We minimize waste. We embrace differences, we dig deeper, and we lead with optimism. So in my mind, all of these apply broadly to, trying to make the world better. We also think about impact in terms of 3 pillars. So we have social impact, environmental impact, and governance. And Etsy has a whole team dedicated to measuring and promoting our impact, which is awesome because it gives us kind of a groundwork to function upon and within, and provides us like the skills and roles from people across the country. Across the company and the country. So then Etsy's kind of tech-specific green initiatives really kicked into gear in 2016. We made, similar to Thoughtworks, we made a public goal of reducing our energy intensity by 25% by 2025, which at the time was groundbreaking and exciting, and our servers were physical servers that we owned in a data center in New Jersey. So we were able to measure our energy use directly. So for the engineering side of the house, we were really able to track our progress towards this goal. In 2018, we started moving to Google Cloud Platform, which was awesome and increased our efficiency in a lot of really remarkable ways. However, we could no longer measure our direct energy use. So I Googled how to measure server energy like 40,000 times and came up short every single time. It's shocking, I know. So we did a bunch of research and found some existing data that we were able to leverage to come up with a coefficient that we could apply to our billing data to roughly estimate how much energy our servers were using in Google Cloud. So we thought that was pretty cool. We talked to some researchers and got their kind of like formal validation on it. We published a Code as Craft blog post on our engineering blog, and we open sourced it so that hopefully the next person to Google this would have something to use. Katie, you want to talk a little more about Cloud Tools?
Sure. Thanks, Emily.
Before you do, I apologize because I was going to give you a minute just to first introduce yourselves, and I know you did. So Katie, please also just...
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm Katie Sundstrom. I'm a software engineer at Etsy. My pronouns are she, her. I've been at Etsy for 2.5 years, and for maybe 2 or so of those years, I was working with Etsy's and then leading Etsy's Sustainable Compute Working Group. So that's where sustainability came in for me. I'll continue our discussion of Cloud Tools. We can go to the next slide. So once we, developed this methodology, we open sourced it. Then what did we do with it? Well, we're using it to measure, of course, our energy usage in the cloud, and we're reporting those numbers in our SEC 10K. We are also using it to visualize our energy usage in the cloud. For a Hack Week, we built, and we actually have some of the engineers on that here today in the audience, we built a data visualization tool for Cloud Tools. And so we're able to break it down by, for instance, project and see how many Cloud Tools individual projects are using. We also incorporated Cloud Tools into our internal experimentation tool. So when product engineers are, going to release a new feature, they can see, not only how it's going to help buyers and sellers, they can also see what its impact on the environment will be. Will it help Etsy, reduce its energy impact? Will it increase energy impact, et cetera? And we're also using it to set relatable internal reduction goals. Emily mentioned that 25% by 2025 reduction goal. And so, of course, we've got to have internal annual goals as sort of stepping stones to that longer term goal. And we're, able to translate that into also more relatable units than, for instance, kilograms of CO2 or kilowatt hours. We're able to talk about it in terms of, how much energy a US home uses on average, for instance. So that's been really helpful for us. Next slide. So after we developed Cloud Jewels, we also had some industry partnerships. We collaborated with Thoughtworks for years now as they were developing their cloud carbon footprint tool. And we also were customer design partners with Google Cloud for their recently released carbon footprint tool. Next slide. So what's next for us at Etsy? Well, Emily mentioned we've got this new sustainability architect role. Very happy that Emily's here with us today. And her role is really to help engineering teams prioritize reducing inefficiencies and making, future thinking, sustainable design decisions. So we really want to, as I said, be tackling those inefficiencies that already exist. And we also want to continue engaging Etsy engineers, getting more folks excited about this and involved. And then, of course, continuing to collaborate with external partners and continuing to contribute to tools and resources for everyone to use. Yep. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I just wanted to highlight something. You mentioned the SEC 10K that you are already disclosing your scope 3 emissions. So that is definitely something that doesn't have to be done today, but it's actually a way of really demonstrating your leadership as a tech company in this space. So I just wanted to highlight that. I think it's an excellent example, especially for being digital native. And it's, as folks know, or perhaps don't know, cloud computing emissions fall under scope 3, and that's one of the hardest categories to measure and track. And if you're reporting that in your 10K report, you are highly obligated to meet those goals as Emily had up here. So that is really taking a commitment and a step forward publicly to demonstrate that. Great. I'll also ask the same question of you, Will, just to kind of set the foundation of what you all are doing at Spotify. And if you wouldn't mind to just giving a quick introduction of what your role is at Spotify.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Will. Engineering manager at Spotify in the cost engineering group. So I work on cost cutting bets and R&D, as well as our newly found carbon footprint team. So yeah, we just spun up this team a few months ago. Basically a group of data scientists and engineers that are committed to helping the company build a roadmap towards our 2030 commitment of net zero carbon emissions in the company. So we spent the first couple years developing a climate handbook of sorts. It's something that feeds into our engineering practicum and serves as guidance for designing and delivering software with like carbon emissions in mind. So we think about things like trying to reduce cellular radio usage. Wi-Fi usage is like much more efficient. Things like using hardware acceleration, much more efficient than like software, and a couple other things. But yeah, we're focused right now on taking those learnings and really finding a place for them within the company at various levels, making suggestions, finding different solutions where we can. I did confirm we have an internal tool that used the Cloud Jewels, so that was awesome. We currently use the Google Cloud carbon footprint export. I think you guys were got ahead of the curve on that. But yeah, that's pretty much what we're up to now.
Awesome, thank you. So thank you all, I was gonna say both, the three of you, for highlighting those commitments. Let's move into some of the more moderated questions now that we've set that foundation. I wanted to ask a question that I think will further shine a spotlight on this unique approach. You highlighted Handbook, you highlighted commitment to an actual role that's responsible in setting priorities for the work that you're doing sustainably. And I wanted to ask how you all navigate the complexities of building and delivering greener software solutions that benefit your customer experience. So you have the internal goals for meeting your emissions reductions, but then you also have, of course, your customers who you are ensuring that you're not taking away from their experience as you're looking to be more sustainable. So given that framing, what does clean tech and green software mean to you as a thought leader, not necessarily the company, but to you? And in your opinion, what would good look like? We'll start with Emily. Yep.
Cool. So I think about this as like an ounce of prevention is a pound of cure. Right now I think at Etsy we see a lot of spikes in cost and feels like waste and old cruft that we find ourselves cleaning up. So for us, I'd really like to see, as Will mentioned, for Spotify, like more groundwork to be efficient proactively instead of reactively. And I think to get there, we'll need to train our engineers more, develop more of like a hive mind around sustainable thinking, and ultimately like help them see engineering decisions with like green lenses instead of rose-colored lenses.
And what does good look like for Spotify, Will?
Yeah. So I think it's a good question. Any sort of like technical innovation that considers the climate or considers sustainability during the development process, I guess kind of fits into that category. So yeah, not every like product can actually move the needle there, but when you get to a global like scope of reach, it becomes like sort of irresponsible to not at least consider it, because most of the, everybody is sharing the effects of it, but not everybody is like participating in the product. So I think for us, good is just to try to not just like do less harm than good, but do as much good as possible within the unique constraints that your organization has.
So this idea of constraints is really interesting because you're a streaming company. There's the financial sector, there's manufacturing, there's these various industries that are all looking at ways to be responsible and good within their purview of work and what they develop and provide their customers. Can you talk a little bit just for kind of the nerds who love streaming and kind of this idea of the work that Spotify does, like what those constraints would look like, just to put a little more like characteristic flavor on that?
Sure, yeah. So as a streaming company, we're sort of bound by the constraints of the infrastructure that we use. So we're sort of constrained by like device emissions, networking emissions, and like cloud emissions. Those are kind of three big pieces of infrastructure that we have. And there's not much we can do to influence there, but as you can imagine, those dimensions look different for like a manufacturing company or logistics company, whatever.
Cool. Okay, and so I think we're gonna talk a little bit about specific tech innovations, go a little deeper here. So I love the idea of avant-garde, new ideas, new approaches. Sometimes it's fairly straightforward and companies just aren't doing it yet because they haven't committed the resources. Sometimes it really is special capital investment in a new innovation. What are some of the specific tech innovations that you all are working on or have worked on that can make sustainability more achievable or have a greater impact on your customers? We'll start with you, Will.
Sure. Yeah, so take that one. We took a look at the numbers, and the majority of our consumption comes from mobile, but the largest chunk of our emissions actually comes from the TV experience. So we've done some work trying to make product changes to our TV experience that should reduce our total device emissions by 10%. So small things like that, we have data science teams always looking at this stuff, but small things like that can really make a huge difference. Additionally, as I said earlier, the Wi-Fi is like much more efficient than activating, radio hardware, cellular hardware on the device. It's about 15 times more efficient actually. So we're always looking for places to be smarter about auto downloads, whether that's like software updates or local caching of songs on the phone, things like that.
Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, sure. In terms of, big tech innovations, I think, I already talked about cloud jewels. And I already talked about what's sort of like coming next for us as well. I think one detail I can add is that we're interested in being able to schedule like time and location for a lot of big, batch data processing that we do. We would love to be able to schedule those for times when renewable energy is available.
Yes, and Cloud Jewels, I wanted to say before, we love Cloud Jewels. We actually expanded on that for our open source cloud carbon footprint tool. And of course, we're continuing to build on that with API, methodology, and dashboard and recommendations. So thank you for that approach and starting with, I think it was all of your research. So thank you so much. So what I'm hearing is we have a lot of these smaller innovations and changes within an organization. But I want to now talk about broad scale impact. How do we go from there and these awesome innovations to having something that's more far reaching, especially because Etsy and Spotify are so large as companies. So it's all about the broad scale impact. So in your opinion, what ways can the tech community and companies with these kind of large influence, large digital arms, how can they make their mark and help drive forward green software best practices? Will, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. So we're always looking for big collaborations. There's a foundation called D-Impact that's pretty popular, probably in this room. But it's a collaboration of corporations and university researchers that have put together all kinds of models that companies can use. I'm trying to think what else. I think, some sort of tech investment pool would be nice as an addition or a replacement for, well, probably more so in addition to traditional, corporate lobbying and spending there.
Like a dedicated resource fund.
Yeah, I think the tech is important there. The governance is not going to get us all the way over the finish line. So yeah, something like that. Also, we've recently seen Google released a product or tool to help shift resources across data centers, similar to what you were talking about there, to take advantage of
more efficient.
More efficient data center resources there. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that can be done, right? From resources to making sure that you're taking advantage of what other service providers have to offer, plus continuing to make your own internal changes through the processes, and then lucky enough to have a dedicated budget. I don't know, Katie or Emily, if you wanted to add to that.
I would say that whether you are a large, small, mid-sized company, you can have an outsized impact in this space. For large companies, obviously they're going to be facing problems at scale, and they're more likely to have, resources that they can spend on non-product work. So they may be able to, have the leeway and time, energy, resources to make these innovations and then share them with smaller companies. Open source their work, so that it can have, even bigger impact than just within the space of their company. And then what, smaller and mid-sized companies have going for them often, right, is that they may be able to be more nimble, they may be scrappier. So I feel like we've, been able to see these exciting innovations shared on a broader scale from, companies of all different sizes. One we've been really excited about lately, I think at Etsy, is Organic Basics, a clothing company that they made an entire low impact version of their website. So you can go and have the traditional browsing experience, or you can opt into this more sustainable experience, this low impact. And they open source their code. You can go look at all their code. They release their manifesto that describes the tenets behind what they did and the decisions they made. So I think that's been really cool.
And that was a smaller company.
Yeah.
To organization.
Organic Basics.
Oh, right,
Mhm.
okay.
And then I think also, collaboration between companies. We've been very privileged to be able to collaborate with Thoughtworks. And I think one example where we've seen collaboration result in big changes for the industry is with the recent new tooling that Amazon and Google as cloud providers have been starting to provide to help their customers understand what their energy usage or carbon footprint might look like in the cloud. I don't think we would have seen those changes if there weren't a lot of companies, behind the scenes talking about how they want those things to happen, and then, going to Google and AWS and saying, we want this to happen.
Driving those changes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So influence is a big one, clearly.
Yeah.
And, I love the idea of larger companies sharing a lot of the innovations and approaches with the smaller companies, the scrappier companies. And I think just to put a finer point on it, that those smaller companies have to have those principles and commitments in place first to really take advantage and drive that change. So Organic Basics, for instance, you said they had a manifesto, they were already thinking about this, and then they were good kind of receivers of the innovation and the information that you were sharing with them. I think smaller companies who may not have the resources and also aren't committing yet to something may not be as fertile ground for the types of innovations. But that's more of a comment. It sounds like those principles are kind of first and foremost with driving this forward, whether it's a small company or a large company. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, and I know I'm just mindful of time. We have about 10 more minutes for discussion, but I want to give 15 minutes or so for questions in the room and for folks online. Cam, are we getting some questions coming in on chat?
Yeah, we've got a few.
Okay, so let's go for another question or so, and then we'll see where that takes us. So, as a large digital company that is taking action to embed sustainability into the ways that you're working, what steps would you recommend to other digital companies to get started to sustain their approach to meet their sustainability goals? Emily.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I would say first and foremost, if you're able to align your ambitions with your company's vision, principles, and even financial goals, that goes a long way. And there are great benefits. So we found that it helps strengthen the brand and brand awareness. Customers really want to spend their money with companies that invest in the future. It's also helped with recruiting and ultimately cost. I mean, if you spend less energy, you pay for less energy. So that's been helpful. I think also, as I said before, leveraging people across the company with different roles and skill sets. It helps you have broader impact and bring in more interesting, diverse, exciting ideas. Let's see. I think collaborating with other companies has been huge for us. We've learned a lot and grown a lot through that. And then finally, I'd say don't give up. Change is really hard and slow and sometimes painful, but starting somewhere. I mean, it took us 2 years from when we saw that we had a problem to coming up with cloud tools.
Yeah, and I think even sharing that information to smaller companies, like a large company taking 2 years, could be that it takes a smaller company less time or twice. But just kind of putting that like baseline out there, I think is helpful information to share. Will, how about you?
Yeah, so I think, like Emily said, there's a pretty big barrier to entry there in terms of like motivation and incentivization when you're looking at like getting people to really focus on this stuff, and aligning with cost is pretty easy, I think. Like understanding your emissions first, right? It's super important. So like do some like foundational data work, try to figure out where most of that is coming from, and then you can try to put together a roadmap from there. Maybe also try joining the exponential roadmap Handbook.org. That's another kind of plug, but that's something that that Spotify has joined and has helped us sort of craft this roadmap. Yeah, I think that's just some suggestions. Yeah.
So I think, so everyone's aware of the silo effect, and we have a lot of really good work happening within, you know, the IT and tech areas here for these two large companies. But, you know, there are a lot of companies out there where IT and the work that IT is doing is not the same across all of the business units. And so I think there's something to be said about, even if you have all the money in the world and dedicated roles, how do you expand the influence and getting everyone pointed in the same direction across internally within those business units or organizations? So have you seen I know you've talked about having a dedicated role, you talked about having a dedicated team, but what are some other ways that might help build alignment across organizations to help maybe take it from 2 years to 1 year next time as you kind of rededicate yourself to these efforts? Will, do you have some ideas on that?
Yeah, I mean, so as I think we talked about like aligning cost and things like that. We have this climate team works very closely at Spotify with the cost engineering team. So you know, we have these like analysts that are like constantly like trolling through our cost information, and you know, as soon as they find something that's like, hey, you can save, you know, X thousands of dollars a month, it's a pretty easy sell to like go to someone and
Who's not thinking about it in terms of emissions, but now thinking about the influence that this could have.
Right. Like any level of the company, that's an enticing kind of conversation to have. So yeah, that's been helpful for us for sure.
I can chime
Yeah,
in. So it's hard, even having dedicated resources. There's sometimes like competition between product and like cost savings. Things that we found helpful have been one, just having a lot of conversations. So conversations with people, again, in various roles. It's helpful to understand other people's roadmaps so you know what their goals are, and you can kind of like, you know, kind of tag along with their goals and try and incorporate your goals into their
That's
goals.
smart, yeah.
Another thing that's worked well is having centralized resources, but that's not always available. And then, as Will said, like leveraging your data, that's been huge. It's easier to make a case if you have data with which to make a case.
And are you guys, through that working team that you mentioned, using that data and rolling it up and sharing it in like broad company announcements?
For sure. In fact, that was the thing I blanked on, was celebrating your wins. So as you are able to make progress, the more you share that across the company.
With data.
With data, exactly.
Yeah.
It can't just be a blanket statement.
Which is nice to have sometimes.
Sure,
but-
yeah. But yeah, that really helps energize people and get them motivated to contribute.
Awesome. Well, we have one more question on the docket, but it's 11:40, and I'm thinking we might want to, do we have questions in the room? Might want to bring in some questions. Okay, is that okay, or are we good to, okay. Why don't we start with a question in the room, and then we'll kick it over to a chat question? Okay.
Yeah, I was just curious, I guess this is more for Etsy, but what you may do to actively improve your users' behavior, both sellers and buyers. And, you know, I know like Amazon, if you buy something at Amazon, they encourage you to group your shipments or pick up at a location, which I'm reading about, you know, the impact of shipping, it's massive. So those sorts of things, and just, you know, giving your message to people why these things are important and what you do about them.
That's a great question. So I'll jump in. I'll start and Kate jump in. We've done things like we offset all of our sellers' shipping. So that's one, and it's pretty huge. And we've communicated that with some press, and we also mentioned it on the website. I think going forward, one of the things we're kicking around is we provide the ability to use reusable packaging, but pushing that more, and even reused packaging. So letting, saying it's okay, and letting buyers even select into a seller can ship using an old Amazon box or something.
Recycling, yeah.
Yeah, Katie, anything else you can think of?
Yeah, no, I think that was, I think, as you mentioned, like, also then, communicating those things to buyers, letting buyers know, like, what impact they're having through their shopping. And I think also, trying to enable them to shop locally.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Oh, less shipping if they're shopping locally.
absolutely.
You can get, currently there's like a filter, you can filter to close to you, but I think maybe we could,
Yeah,
that could be more prominent,
right. Yeah, so I think that's something we're kicking around as well.
Nice.
Do you get, just to follow up, but do you get feedback that those things are valuable to people? I mean, are you getting positive feedback from sellers and buyers on these initiatives, or?
I don't know, because I'm not in product. I would assume so, because we've kept them up and invested more in them, but
This might be one of those examples of the working across silos and getting that feedback as like maybe a built-in communication loop on that feedback as this kind of takes off.
absolutely, room to improve.
Let's go with the chat question, Cam, if you have something.
Yeah, I can move over towards the camera too. for
You-
this
yeah.
mic, but the first question is, what is the #1 green practice an individual developer can do to make a difference? If you can maybe repeat that too.
What is we have speakers, what is the #1 individual practice that
An individual developer can do to make a difference.
an individual developer can do to make a difference? Just one.
Yeah, I would say something that works like across, mobile development, web development, hardware, like maybe trying to reduce polling, network calls, frequent polling. Network is like pretty much the lion's share of like emissions. So that's something I would first consider, and then also maybe it's sort of in the same vein, but like customized like metadata or packets, anything that you can do to like reduce the size of the data that you're sending across the pipes.
Yeah, I can chime in with two. One is design into your system a way to automatically clean up. So it's so hard to know what's not being used anymore. If you can identify it, you can get rid of it. And then on a kind of like more larger scale, I'd say get feedback on your work. So developing in a silo is a sure way to overuse resources. We have like a good design review process at Etsy, and that helps build a hive mind and like makes more people aware of your decisions and
reduces redundancy.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, it's huge.
Yeah, good old fashioned communication can go a long way.
I have a question. So that reminds me the effort to make software secure. Like you mentioned, you introduce some improve the software to make it reduce the emission. But later on, we may add in new features, etc. We may break that. So it seems to be an endless game to increase the emission and reduce the emission. Do we have some kind of way to actually monitor that all the time to make sure when we make some improvement, it will not be break again?
Right. We do have dashboards that we use at Spotify that monitor cost and also like carbon efficiency. So they go down from the company level to the like individual team level. And so I think that's an important point that you're touching on, is like monitoring and analytics. Maybe that's the #1 thing that you could do, because if you can't measure it, then how do you know if you're actually changing anything? But dashboards are pretty important. I mean, that enables you to do like A/B testing in between features and whatnot. So that's what we use.
And does that monitoring and analytics always come with some type of like alert or awareness? Like, is that just a given, or how soon after do you have to respond or act? Because monitoring is great, but then how do you know you're taking action, and how is an engineer made aware that something's going awry?
It can. So we operate Slack bots. that do alerts, and we also have like email alerts as well if something goes like way out of threshold. But it's pretty customizable. You can manually just go check it if you'd like. So yeah.
I can kind of piggyback off of that answer because we're doing something very similar, with monitoring and alerting. That data visualization dashboard was able to show changes over time, and we were even able to, understand those changes over time in relation to our business. Like maybe we're using more energy because it's, the holiday season and everyone's going to Etsy to buy gifts, right? That kind of thing, and then able to compare years to each other as well. As our business is growing, is our energy expenditure growing as well? And then I would also say, in relation to if you're trying to think about, a specific change you're making and what is the impact of that specific change versus just looking sort of broader scale changes over time. I mentioned earlier that we incorporated Cloud Jewels into our internal experimentation tool. So that's really very specific, a very, particular change that someone is making, like a product engineer, whether it's, changing the color of a button or actually releasing a new feature or, changing the way that something really operates on the website. That will be run through the experimentation platform, and you're able to see in really nuanced detail what the impact of your change is. And now that we've incorporated Cloud Jewels there, you're also able to see what the energy impact of the changes.
So it gives you a little bit of that forecasting before you actually sign on the bottom line.
Exactly.
Nice. Any other questions in the room? It looks like Cam might have another question. Okay.
So the next questions I think might be more directed at Etsy. In your footprint calculation methodology, do you consider the software development process, like developer laptops, network use during the time, model training, hardware, staging infra, etc.? And then also, are you working on methodology standardization? If so, which standardization bodies are you working with?
Great questions. So I do think we take into account developer laptops in our Scope 3 emissions, but we don't look at that in our Cloud Jewels coefficient. We do look at machine learning and we do look at machine learning and infrastructure energy use in Cloud Jewels. And then second part.
The methodology.
Right. Standardization.
Yeah.
So that's a great question. That's something I'm looking at this year. If I'm being honest, I love Cloud Jewels. I think it's an incredible thing that we've done and a great source of collaboration. But I think in the interest of standardization, it would make sense for us to move towards either Thoughtworks' Cloud Carbon footprint or Google's Cloud Carbon tool, just because then we're comparing apples to apples and working more closely with other companies. So I'm hoping we can internally move in that direction.
Yeah, honestly, that was one of the most, exciting things I think to come out of Cloud Jewels was getting to see how Thoughtworks took it and ran with it. I mean, just amazing thing that you've developed here with your carbon footprint tool. And so, we're really excited to dive deeper into that.
Cool. Okay, I think the next question may be directed to Spotify. Do you account for client/customer energy use? For example, local browser compute or end user streaming bandwidth, infrastructure versus data center / cloud energy consumption?
We do. So we don't have great measurement tools for device usage, but we work with our CDN partners and with our networking partners to be able to try and get estimate numbers there. Those are basically just they feed into our internal dashboards because they're not ever going to be exact numbers. We would need to work with device manufacturers to be able to get exact power draw numbers and things like that. But hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, next question. There's much discussion on energy and emissions, which is awesome. Do you also track / consider the other UN SDGs and what impact are they having on your efforts? So I think anyone can answer this.
So that'd be a broader responsible tech labor, sourcing, anything like much broader outside of the data center carbon emission tooling itself?
Absolutely, yeah. Our focus definitely is in that, like, you know, data center, cloud, energy from computing space. So we're, you know, there are other people at Etsy we would love to be able to redirect this question to who could speak much more expertly to it. But I will try to try to do it justice. Like,
You have an ESG
We do.
commitment, right, which is part of the
Yeah.
social, the governance, water, all the other waste elements beyond energy.
exactly. We have a whole team dedicated to this, and then we also have folks embedded throughout the company working on this, like our strategic sourcing folks, amazing, like all, you know, working to make sure that what's being done in their space, just like for us, we're trying to be responsible about the way we're computing. If they're in strategic sourcing, they're trying to do it responsibly. And similar to us, like they have like goals and things that they're, you know, working towards, and you know, commitments that they're making. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of work being done there.
That's broader. Do you want to add to that, or?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Yeah, I'd love to redirect that question to somebody else's spot.
But you have other folks who are working on this much more broadly beyond just the emissions reductions.
We do, yeah. I mean, my purview is pretty strictly in engineering, but
Yeah.
yeah, across the company, we definitely do.
Okay, next question we have, isn't travel and logistics a big consumer of energy in your businesses? So if that's applicable, maybe how much, if you know?
I don't know off the top of my head the percentage, but I do know that Etsy takes that into account and
It's part of your
reports on it.
baselining, right? It's probably your scope 3 baselining for commuter and business travel.
Absolutely, and I think we have some internal goals on making it easier for employees to book greener travel.
We have that too, yeah. You can choose your emissions plus the cost and make those decisions, yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, we try to think of something we've done in that regard. We are like pretty fully remote now, or we have this home mix. You can work from anywhere. That's if that's something that helps with commutes at least.
Absolutely.
Well, and something I could add too there is, if you're interested to learn more about this, at least, you know, for Etsy specifically, you can go on our website or, you know, just Google like Etsy SEC 10K that I mentioned earlier, and you can read a really detailed write-up, probably, you know, more detailed than you originally wanted, about, yeah, what our emissions are, how we're measuring them, the different things that we are accounting for. And so you can get more details and, you know, numbers for all these questions you have, yeah.
That's amazing transparency. That's a lot. Scope 3 is like 15 categories of action.
Big document.
Yeah, and like so much, you know, kudos to all the folks at Etsy who are working so hard to make that happen. I know it's a lot of work to make it happen.
Yeah. We are 5 minutes shy of 12. I think I have one more question that we can end with, unless you have maybe one quick one.
There's one or two, if we want.
Why don't you ask one more, and then I'll end it with a question here around green software principles.
Okay. I know we asked for a bit more elaboration on this, so we could try to say, the question was, I'd like to raise a query of how much of the research work is actually put in use, and how is it evaluated for making impact for the environment, like end-to-end delivery. If that makes sense.
How much of the research is in use? Is that the question?
How much of the research work is actually put into use, and how is it evaluated for making an impact?
Oh,
So might be
awesome.
like third-party verification.
I think
Might
so,
be,
and
yeah.
so I mean, all of our research is in use, and we continue to add to it and, you know, collaborate with other companies whose research is in use. So, and when we were initially doing it, we reached out to some of the authors of the white papers that we were using, and some of the people working on the sources of data, and another company that specializes in like sustainable accounting. So we had all of them review our research and give it a thumbs up. And each year we do an internal re-review. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh yeah, we re-review our coefficient and incorporate any significant changes we've made,
And then that every year when we report our emissions, that all gets audited again. Like they look again at our methodology. So like any updates we've made, they're gonna audit those. So it's we work hard to make sure it's all like documented and And
Does that go for the Cloud Jewels methodology too? So you're getting that verified again? Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, in terms of Spotify's efforts, I mean, we have a full team of full-time data scientists and engineers that are working on this, and it informs a lot of our like product decisions and stuff. So I'd say very similarly, it's yeah, we're pretty heavily motivated to use the research that we generate.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Cam, for putting you on the spot and having you read the questions. That was really helpful. Let's just end it with one question and then we'll go back to the agenda. Danielle, if you could pull that up in a second, and then we'll review the 2 workshops and remind folks how to access them after lunch. So here's our last question. How might your respective companies use green software principles to shift practices and behavior, which is a big one, in the industry? Basically, how do we continue to drive changing the status quo of doing this work? Katie, or Will?
Sure.
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, I think for what these kind of like outreaches are really good, as Katie mentioned before, like celebrating the wins within the company, getting visibility about the way that things are moving in the space. Also, we've been thinking about ways to like engage with our customers on things like this. So I don't know what that looks like. Maybe a feature, maybe a product. Who knows? But there's certainly like people out there that are, they want to be thoughtful about the way that they consume music, for instance.
Yes,
it's a big
so
part
going
of
to
people's lives.
going to the customer is always a good place, right? Because then they're driving the change that you need to respond to, as opposed to the other way around.
Right. So yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
I can add to that. Yeah, I would say, start internally, and share those wins internally. Like the Cloud Jewels methodology was developed by the Sustainable Compute Working Group, which was a group of volunteers. It's, folks who were excited and passionate about it, and, maybe, someone presented at an all hands meeting or something like that about the work that was being done, and they said, oh, I want to join that too, and I want to help too, right? I know that was what I did. That's how I got involved. Get folks internally excited about it, and then as we've all said, I think, right, is go celebrate those wins publicly too, because the more that you do, doing things like this, right, the more that other folks learn that this work is possible and it's being done, and that they can do it too, the more you're empowering that change.
And that there's frameworks, you have the methodology, it's open source, there's things to start with, you don't have to start from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Will, Katie, Emily, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your insights and kind of going through this with us, and also taking some of these questions that, I know can always be like, so thank you. Those were really good answers. I think we're gonna move to a reminder of what's next for folks, and we'll show the agenda in just a second. So for those in the room, we have a lovely lunch waiting for you all in the kitchen behind me. So we'll take an hour. We'll rejoin at 1:00. For those on the phone, you're welcome to log out and call back in at 1:00. So here's the tricky bit. We've got 2 awesome workshops coming your way. You get to choose which one you want to do for those calling in. So those who are interested in the software carbon intensity spec, we have our illustrious Dan Lewis-Tokley, a developer here at Thoughtworks, is going to be leading that. For that one, please use the same Zoom that you used to call in for this session. And it's in the email that I sent out to all virtual attendees a few days ago. And then the second, option B, we have our other illustrious developer here, Eric Smith, who will be leading us on a sustainable UX workshop journey. And that will be a separate Zoom. And I think what we can do is probably put it in the chat, but Cam, I don't know if I gave that to you, so we can, if you give me a minute, I can send that to you and you can pop it in the chat. And then here's again the 2 options for those who are kind of like, wait, which one? What are we doing in option A, option B? Here's a quick little summary of what you can choose from. So we're gonna get the Zooms in the chat for those of you who may be interested in the sustainable UX, which is a different Zoom. And we'll go ahead and here and break for lunch, and then the SCI workshop is gonna be in this room, and the sustainable UX workshop is gonna be right out next door. Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. And we can, mind getting the mute to Danielle, the mute and the